Hello, everybody. It's a long time since we've seen each other. I'm here in my studio, so the dogs aren't right with me, but they are right outside. So hopefully they won't be too bothersome. I don't even know if you're going to be able to hear Steve anymore. But anyway, I want to get back to the Karen Reed case. I've been doing some traveling. I'm going to be a grandma, so I've been traveling, and I got some tears in my Achilles tendon that are killing me, but I put my foot up on a stool right now and we're going to just try to bust through this. I am doing a fundraiser for Karen Reed right now. It is in the Justice for Karen Reed, John O'Keefe, the Turtle Boy Facebook group. It's through Sensi, and if you're interested, send me a message and I will tell you how you can donate to that. But anyway, okay, so let's jump back in with Proctor. So the last video was the direct by Lally, and now we're going to get into the cross. What worries me about Proctor, because as you know, he was excused from his job, but what he did has the potential to affect so many other cases, and it's really scary because one that I cover on this channel was Anna Walsh, and it hasn't gone to trial yet. Brian Walsh, he killed his wife, kind of scattered her all over Mass. They haven't found her, but he's involved with that case. And of course, being a lawyer, doing his job, Brian Walsh's lawyer is calling into question a lot of things because Proctor was involved. And you'd really hate to see somebody like that get off on a technicality because of some jerk like this, right? So let's hope that doesn't happen. But all right, so this is, again, Michael Proctor, Norfolk County DA Office Homicide Unit at the time, not anymore. Massachusetts State Police, he was with them for 10 years and 5 years with the DA Homicide Unit. On August 17th of 2022, Proctor was sitting at his desk, presumably alone, at about 10 p.m. He's going through Karen Reed's personal cell phone and texting with his friends and colleagues at the Mass State Police. It was with troopers DeChico, Fanning, Buchanan, Moore, and Kukowski about going through her phone. Fanning and Buchanan are his supervisors. Proctor refers to Karen Reed as his R-word client. When DeChico sent a photo of Yannetti, he said, "Funny, I'm going through his R-word client's phone right now." R-word client equals Karen Reed. Regarding Yannetti, he said, "I hate that man." Yeah, nice. Jackson said, "Were you upset or annoyed or pissed off that Karen Reed had gotten legal representation?" Proctor said, "No, not at all. That's her right." Jackson said, "In August of 2022, you said you absolutely hate him, right?" Talking about Yannetti. Proctor says, "I didn't use absolutely, sir." Jackson said, "You used truly." He's so... Proctor just, it's close enough, right? Just go with it. Anyway, Jackson says, "How do you feel about him now? He's sitting right there." Proctor has the nerve to say, "I still don't care for him now." And that's fine. That's your right. I mean, there's plenty of attorneys out there that I don't like, but it's just like, wow. I mean, wow. So Jackson says, "What did you tell your colleagues you were looking for as you sat at almost 10 o'clock at night on a Wednesday night, August 17th, 2022, looking through Karen Reed's phone?" He said, "I provided an inappropriate joke as an update. No nudes so far." Jackson says, "You said that to your bosses?" And he said, "Yes, sir." He says, "Have you ever looked for naked pictures of a male subject that you're investigating?" And Proctor says, "I've never looked for naked pictures on anyone's phone." Now, I know, I mean, it's like locker room talk, right? Like, my son, my husband, they're cops, in the military, whatever. I get it. That's, you talk amongst yourselves, whatever. You're going to joke around. You're going to be inappropriate. I mean, I have kind of a twisted sense of humor myself. But when your bosses are in this group text, it just seems wildly inappropriate to be talking like that. So Jackson says, this is a citizen. She's a woman. You're supposed to be objectively investigating her. Does your text message to your colleagues at the Massachusetts State Police reflect an objective investigation of a citizen? Do you believe that your text messages were reflective of an objective investigator? And Proctor says, I believe poor jokes have an unprofessional language, have no bearing on the integrity and the facts and the physical evidence of this case. Jackson says they have no place in a professional investigation because it shows bias, right? You weren't so much as objectively investigating Miss Reed as objectifying her, correct? And I loved that. I loved that because that's exactly what he was doing. He was totally objectifying her, and all of these other guys were just going right along with it. Anyway, if you're a woman watching this right now, just kind of put yourself in that position. It's very, very frustrating. So Proctor says, again, Mr. Jackson, it was a poor choice of words and a joke that I should not have texted out. But from the start of the investigation, we didn't know what we had. And that is not what he said on direct. Go back and watch the other video after you watch this one. That is not what he said. Jackson says, your point in saying no nudes so far to your colleagues in the Mass State Police was to suggest that you were looking for nudes so you'd update them when you found them, correct? Proctor says, incorrect. Jackson says, those texts included 2 supervisors. Did Trooper Fanning or Buchanan ever dress you down in response to that text of something so abhorrent as looking for nudes of a female subject of an investigation? And he said, not that I recall. Buchanan actually responded to the photo of Yannetti. He liked the comment going through the R-word client's phone. Buchanan is, like Proctor, is here for being an ass. And Buchanan's like right underneath. Jackson says an investigation and investigator need to be fair and impartial. No conflicts, no bias. Just follow the evidence. Everybody's a suspect until they're not. And I've told you that. I took forensics, I've taken criminology courses, and you start with the closest and you work your way out, and until you are ruled out, you're still in. You're still a suspect, but that's not how this investigation went at all. Jackson says, early in an investigation, an investigator needs to be free of bias and prejudice. You can't pick a suspect and find the evidence to support that. Now, Proctor's testimony on direct, I've got it highlighted here for you. He said, based on the day's investigation, it was clear that Karen Reed had struck John O'Keefe with her vehicle. Right off the jump. He had already made that decision. So do you really think that he was trying to rule out other people? No, because he had ruled her in and only her in. So, in his mind, I feel like he was like, yeah, we're done here. Okay, so now we've got some more text. Michael Proctor text. This is the group chat with the police, John Fanning, Yuri Buchanan, Chris Moore, David DeChico, and Jeff, I think it's Kukowski. At 9:42 p.m., you can see he sent the image of David Yannetti, and that's the image that I'm showing up there is the image that he sent. And he said the picture of Yannetti was from quite some time ago, because Yannetti obviously is younger in this picture, so I guess he wanted to point out that in court for everybody for some reason, because we can't tell. I don't know. 9:44, Proctor says, funny, I'm going through his R-word client's phone. Then he says, no nudes so far. And then he says, I hate that man. I truly hate that man. So the group text with his buddies includes 9 people, some named Bird, Whitey, Doc, others identified by the last 4 numbers of their phone number. The text thread covers the time period of October 18th of 2021 at 8:48 a.m. through August 31st, 2022 at 11:19 p.m. There are 38,707 messages in that time frame. January 29th, 2022 at 10:52 p.m., Proctor was willing to let his high school buddy his high school buddies details of the investigation, including the name of the victim, and he also informed them of this. All the powers that be want answers ASAP. Now, again, this is 16 hours into the investigation. All the powers that be, so that would be like, the big bosses, right? They want answers ASAP. So, right there, it sounds like there's pressure. Rush this, get it done. Get it done, get it over with, get out, done. Don't want to hear about it anymore. Jackson says, you knew at that point that this was not in any way, shape, form, or fashion going to implicate another cop. Proctor said, correct. I mean, to me, doesn't that kind of tell you everything that you need to know? He knew right away this wasn't going to implicate another cop. So they weren't even considering the Alberts. The Muck Alberts. They weren't considering them at all. It was Karen Reed and done. Okay, so Chip is Proctor's nickname, one of many apparently. And this, again, is 16 hours into the investigation. One of his friends with the number 5051 texts and he says, Chip, Proctor, name of that BP cop. Proctor texts back, John O'Keefe. Then Bird says, I'm sure the owner of the house will receive some shit. Proctor says, nope. Homeowner is a Boston cop, too. Bird says he must have been a puddle to accomplish that. Then Bird says, who's the homeowner? And then Bird says, I hope not, but I can see it. So when he said nope, he said that he meant he's not going to be a suspect, not going to get in any trouble, not going to be implicated in any way. Proctor says, correct, because Brian Albert had nothing to do with John O'Keefe's death. How do you know? You never checked. You never investigated that angle. Proctor said Brian Albert had nothing to do with John O'Keefe's death. He knew this to his satisfaction and to all members who investigated that day. 16 hours in, without having been to the crime scene, without having been inside the home, and only interviewing 3 witnesses, 2 named McCabe and 1 named Albert, he's texting this. And AJ says, in other words, Bird wrote that the homeowner must have been so drunk, so wasted to have killed him. Jackson says, 16 hours in, you had this case nice and wrapped up. Proctor says, yes, based on the evidence my office uncovered that day, the 1 shoe at the scene, the 1 shoe at the hospital, John's injuries, the broken taillight pieces underneath the snow. In his mind, the case was cut and dry. And in these texts to the same people, he said, she waffled him. I looked at his body at the hospital. And then somebody said she waffled him, and he says he was banged up. 0095 says, I thought he was drunk. Did he get beat up? And Proctor's response is nope. Bird says, so the owner of the house was a woman cop that beat him? Proctor said, that's what I initially thought after talking to Canton paramedics. Then I saw the guy. So after initial talks with the paramedics, Proctor thought he had been beaten to death. He says he entered into the investigation with an open mind. It was given to him as a medical situation. When they saw John's body at the hospital and they saw his injuries, they started working out how those injuries could have occurred. He initially thought John had a physical altercation that led to his death, which tracks with what everybody else is thinking. But somehow we've gone from that to, nope, she hit him with her car. Initially, he was on the right track, so what changed? It was, I think, the pressure from the powers that be that he was talking about. So he was aware that John O'Keefe had a 2-inch laceration to his head, leading to a skull fracture, a small laceration over his right eye, just under the eyebrow, a laceration on his nose, patterned scratches on his right arm, no injuries below the neck, no broken bones, no fractures, not a single bruise below the neck. Bear is another nickname for Proctor. Bird texts, Bear, let's focus. What does she waffled him mean? What's the story? Proctor says, remember, 16 hours in, guys, she hit him with her car. 5051 says, oh, Jesus. Bird says, okay, that's effed up. And Proctor says, intentional or not? So he's decided that she hit him with her car, but right there, he says, intentional or not? So how is he so sure this is a murder and not an accident? Proctor has seen a shoe missing at pedestrian strikes, but those were high-speed 60-plus miles an hour incidents. He can't recall if he's ever seen a victim of a vehicle versus pedestrian incident with no bruises. He never disclosed Brian Albert's name in the group text, but he had no problem revealing that John O'Keefe and Karen Reed's names to his high school buddies in chat. So 5051 says, oh, Jesus. Bird says, okay, that's effed up. Intentional or not, gotcha. He was frozen in the driveway and she didn't see him. That's another, this is Proctor. That's another animal we won't be able to prove. He just said they're not going to be able to prove. What's the name of the Canton cop living in Canton, the one involved? And like I said, he says that he never disclosed Brian Albert's name, but he had no problem revealing John O'Keefe and Karen Reed's names to his high school buddies. But, you know, let's protect the Alberts at all costs, right? Okay. The BPD, this is from 0095. They said the BPD have any jurisdiction here because it was their own. And Proctor says, nah, Kat, it's the total opposite. They have to recuse themselves. Same with Canton. 5051 says, but I assume you guys are out to make it cut and dry because it involves cops, right? Bird says something stinks. And then Proctor says, yeah, but there will be some serious charges brought on the girl. And 5051 says, gotta be. 5051 says, I can only imagine what internal affairs at the BPD are trying to get out there. 5051 says, she hot at least? And then Proctor says, from all accounts, he didn't do anything wrong. She's a whack job. See you next Tuesday. So, no, there was no doubt in Proctor's mind that Canton PD had taken a step back from participating in the investigation. He said so right there in that text. He knew they recused themselves completely. But then now, after the fact, he's going to act like he thought they were just recused from certain aspects. Proctor says that on the 29th, everything pointed to Karen Reed hitting John O'Keefe with her vehicle. Jackson said the accounts you had were from two people named McCabe and one named Albert, who happened to be the homeowner and a Boston cop. I mean, it's so convenient, isn't it? Proctor says, I had interviewed Kerry Roberts as well. Jackson says, from all accounts, he didn't do anything wrong, was your decision. 16 hours into the investigation. Proctor says, yes. Jackson says the other determination you made was that Karen Reed was a whack job, see you next Tuesday. And Proctor says, yes. 17 hours in, he decided he was going to put it on the girl. He's going to make sure it's cut and dry and make sure that she's effed. And then he was so obviously coached on what to say because he repeats it over and over and over. It was unprofessional of me. That's something I shouldn't have done. According to my response at the time, I found it funny, apparently. So these texts, we go back to the she hot at least, and Proctor says, from all accounts, he didn't do anything wrong. She's a whack job, see you next Tuesday. And then he says, yeah, she's a babe with a weird Fall River accent, though, no ass. Not newsworthy then, says Bird. 5051 says, oh, she's skating. Proctor says, zero chance she skates. She's effed. And then Bird says, good, no ass bitch. And then Proctor said, you know, ha ha ha. Ugh. I don't even like reading these. They make me feel icky. Okay, so on the 1st of February 2022, we're 3 days in now, Proctor sends a picture of Miss Reed being escorted from the State Police Milton Barracks. I don't know if this is exactly the picture that he sent, but it was the one that I found, so I included it. 4146 says, is that chick a smoke? 4146 sends a question mark. Proctor says, eh. And then he says, nutbag, as Chief would say. Chief is a friend of theirs. And then Proctor says, she's got a leaky balloon knot. It leaks poo. So he's making fun of Karen Reed and referring to her medical condition specifically focused on her anus, her butthole. Jackson says, Trooper Proctor, explain what a balloon knot is to the jurors. He says, essentially, I guess your rectum area. And Jackson says, your anus. And Proctor says, yes. I loved how he got all these little digs in there to kind of like try to embarrass him a little bit and make him say things that he was obviously uncomfortable with. Like, he's perfectly comfortable texting it, but he doesn't want to say it like out in public, like in front of this jury. It was good job, Jackson. I need to get a drink. Hold on just one moment. Okay. So Proctor was not aware Karen Reed had suffered a colectomy surgery, a very serious surgery. He was not aware that she had 10 surgeries in 18 months several years prior. He was not aware that she had serious medical issues that she suffered with, that she's been a victim of for years. February 2nd, 2022 at 4:15 p.m., Whitey says, what are you guzzling on? Proctor says, nothing, writing a warrant. And then Whitey sends a picture of he sends a video of the 80s band that was called Warrant. So I put a picture of Warrant up there. And then he says, let's see, 0095 says, LOL, wait, why does her asshole leak? After that text, they go to sidebar. And when they come back, the following text weren't read. Jackson just said, you and your buddies continue to discuss Karen Reed's medical issues. Proctor says he had integrity in the investigation, but not in his texts. The texts were juvenile and regrettable. Again, very coached. As lead investigator, he was tasked with making sure the investigation remained free of any conflicts of interest. He denies having any conflict of interest in this case. On February 1st, 2024, he testified under oath in another proceeding that he did not know any members of the Albert or McCabe families. He asked to review the minutes so that he can accurately testify to what he said. At the grand jury, he was asked, did you communicate with First Assistant D.A. Beeland that you, did not know and had no relationship with the Albert and McCabe families? Proctor answered, to the best of my recollection, the same conversation took place with everyone I talked to about this because it's the same answer. It's the facts that I shared with everyone. What? The grand jury said, meaning you told Assistant Beeland that you didn't have a relationship with members of the Albert and McCabe families, and Proctor said correct. He says he did not know the McCabes, he does not know most of the Alberts, and he has little to no relationship with Chris and Julie, so that's what he meant by that answer. Jackson says, the question wasn't if you knew most of the Alberts. Proctor says, I don't know the McCabes. I don't have a relationship with the Alberts. Says he knows Chris, Julie, and Colin. The grand jury asked if he had ever gone to any Massachusetts State Police supervisor to disclose any potential conflict of interest in this case. Proctor answered the need never came up. He told Lally he didn't have relationships with or know members of the Albert or McCabe family, and Proctor explains that knowing members of the Albert family is different than having relationships. He stands by his grand jury testimony and says it wasn't a lie. Okay, so here's some more fun diagrams that I do for you guys. So Proctor's sister is Courtney Elberg, and she's his best friend. She's good friends with Jillian Daniels and Julie Albert. So we've got Proctor and Courtney, they're siblings. Courtney and Jillian are friends. Jillian and Julie are siblings. Courtney and Julie are friends. Jen and Nicole are siblings. Nicole and Brian are spouses. Chris and Brian are siblings. Brian and Colin are uncle and nephew. Chris is Colin's dad. Colin is Julie's son. She is his mom, and she is the spouse of Chris Albert. So I would say that yeah, there could have been a conflict. The Alberts have been over to his parents' house, and he's been there at the same time as Chris, Julie, and Colin. On or around January 29th, 2022, he was close enough friends with Julie that she had his personal cell phone number and vice versa. February 24th, 2022, CP is a nickname he has for his sister. He says, this is the weekend I've been waiting for. Oh, wait, this is from Julie Albert. Okay, this is from Julie Albert to Proctor. I'm sorry. It's been a while. This is the weekend I've been waiting for. Michael, please send ski videos if CP doesn't share with me. He knew Julie and Chris Albert were witnesses and that Colin was involved with the case. On January 19th, 2022, he texted his sister Courtney whether she thought Julie Albert might be available to babysit his own children. He personally interviewed Chris and Julie Albert regarding this case on February 10th of 2022 at 5:30 p.m. with Buchanan. Julie called him at 6:17 p.m. and he called her back at 6:21 p.m. for 3 minutes and 58 seconds, but he doesn't recall the content of the conversation and never mentioned it in any report. He doesn't recall if Chris or Julie mentioned that Colin was at 34 Fairview the night of the incident. After his interview with Julie Albert, his sister texted him. How did it go at Julie? She was so nervous. Proctor says, ha 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 ha. It was fine, just a quick convo. He says he wasn't reporting back to his sister with progress of his investigation. He made his sister aware of newsworthy stuff. Starting as early as January 29th, 2022, he mentioned Julie and Chris Albert and the McCabe's to his sister. Okay, so January 29th, 2022 at 3:05 p.m., the blue texts are Proctor, the pink texts are his sister Courtney. Proctor says homicide, describing the nature of the case to his sister. Courtney says the Canton thing is a homicide. He says, don't say a word to anyone. So right there, he knows he shouldn't be saying this to her because he's telling her to keep her mouth shut. She says, of course not. He says, in the very least, it is suspicious. Courtney says, this is your livelihood. I would never mess with that. Proctor says, Julie and Chris were at the bar with the victim and his girlfriend. Got to interview them. Courtney says, you got to be kidding me. He says, it's not a big deal. And Courtney says, I bet I know the person. Sounds like it is. January 29th, 2022 at 3:05 p.m. continued. Proctor says, no, I meant that they were at the bar with them. And Courtney says, yeah, I got that part, but I know a lot of their friends. Proctor doesn't see a problem with this exchange because nothing jumps out at him. January 30th, 2022 at 9:13 a.m., Courtney texts him, Jesus Christ, the party was at one of the Alberts. He's sharing internal details of the investigation with his sister, who is best friends with Jillian Daniels, and one of her closest friends is Julie Albert. And he doesn't see a problem with this. February 1st, 2022, Courtney Proctor texts that she's meeting with Julie Albert before he interviewed her. He says he had conversations with Courtney Proctor regarding the case in person and on the phone, not just in text. So he's talking to her about this all the freaking time. February 1st, 2022 at 5:57 p.m. Proctor, what's up? Courtney, nothing. I just saw Julie and she said when this is over, she wants to get you a thank you gift. Proctor says, get Elizabeth one. Courtney says, because I guess her and Chris were friends with John and she's so proud of you for leading this investigation. So this proves that he did ask for a gift for his wife from Julie Albert for his participation in the case. Even though he says he didn't, he clearly right there said, get Elizabeth one. He says he wasn't using his sister as an intermediary between him and Julie. At the state grand jury, he testified that he knew Colin was at 34 Fairview. Let that sink in for a minute. He says he made no concerted effort to keep Colin's name out of the investigation. Colin's name is not seen in any police report until July 18th of 2023, y'all. Proctor says this is because Colin wasn't at the home. He left at 12:10 a.m. There's the magic time 12:10 a.m. Everything happens at 12:10 a.m. in Canton, before anyone from Waterfall arrived back there. If he finds a witness to be credible with no reason to lie, he will take their word for it, he said. He says you should try to support witness statements with corroborating evidence, talking to other witnesses, looking at cell phone data, geolocation data, cell tower information. There are a myriad of ways you can find out if someone's telling the truth about where they were and when they were there. In his handwritten notes from his interview with Julie Nagel on October 5th, 2022, the list of people at 34 Fairview, per Julie Nagel, was Brian Jr., Julie, Mary Kent, Emily Fabiano, Courtney Alba, Colin Albert, and Sarah Levinson. He drafted a report about the Julie Nagel interview and turned that report over to the Commonwealth. The report was entered into discovery and provided to the defense. In that report, Proctor lists the people at 34 Fairview as Brian Jr., Mary Kent, Emily Fabiano, and Sarah Levinson. He says he excluded Colin Albert because he arrived later in the evening and the other females were there from the start. Jackson said he only omitted Colin, but I noticed that Courtney Alba was also not listed on the report. I don't know if that's significant or not, but it's definitely significant that Colin wasn't mentioned. So I'm going to wrap up for today. I'm going to keep this short because I'm losing my voice, but we will finish tomorrow on the cross of Proctor and just keep on moving through. But it's really great to be back with you guys. I hope you will leave me a super thanks, maybe a PayPal or a Cash App would be great because I've worked so hard on all this research, all these videos. I really put a lot of time and effort in, and I hope you appreciate it. Give this a like to boost it into the algorithm, and if you liked it, hit that subscribe. Pop off in the comments, tell me what you think, and let me know if you want to get in on that fundraiser. And until tomorrow, y'all take care. Bye.